I'm sure there are healthy and unhealthy ways to cope with death anxiety. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. What I want people to think about is, what does it mean when we have these sensations, when we have these emotions, when we're grappling with existential angst? What are these feelings or emotions trying to tell us? I think it might be trying to tell us is that up until this point, we don't feel like we've lived life according to the values and the meaning that we want to live life to. And so I think uh, when we experience this death anxiety, it's trying to drive us to live life in a more fulfilling way. I think one of the best ways that you can try and cope with the idea that you're going to die, because I'm sorry to break it to you, but you are, we all are, is this idea that perhaps you want to leave something behind even
Hmm.
after you pass. And so if you are encumbered with death anxiety, you need to think about, you know, one day biologically I'm going to die, but what can I leave behind for the generations after me? Whether that's passing on lessons, ideals, values to your children or your grandchildren, or whether it's making a more meaningful contribution to the society that's given so much to you.
Hmm.
All of human history is a history of humans giving to each other. We are allowed to make this podcast today because of thousands of years of humans working their butts off to try and make sure that the next generation has a better life than they do. And so I think it's both our duty, but also our great honor to try and ensure that generations after us have a better life than we do. And I think that, to bring it back to death anxiety, it's very hard to be fearful of death when you feel like you've lived life to its fullest and that you're leaving behind something after you pass. And I think I alluded to this before, that all of us are fearful of death to an extent. But if we are overly fearful of death, if it's something that's really on our minds, it's probably trying to tell us something. And so what might it be trying to tell us? Well, maybe we don't feel very connected to the people around us. Maybe we do feel socially isolated. And so maybe it's a sign that we should be trying to foster our human connections, our social connections. I think in many ways, society and culture in this day and age has driven us into social isolation. It's alienated us in so many different ways. And we need to be turning to each other rather than turning to consumerism, rather than turning to drugs, rather than turning to TV, rather than turning to all that rubbish that doesn't actually help.